listening to Second Wind with Joyce Buford, where women who are ready to expand their life adventure discover the tools to stop playing small and tap into the courage required to enjoy their second wind. Welcome.
Good morning, wherever you are. I am so excited that you're here. We have another awesome program for you today, and you are going to love this lady. She is a Southern Belle, and she grew up in Georgia. Oh my gosh, Augusta, Georgia. So anyway, we will be talking with her shortly. I do want you to gather yourself into a comfy spot, get ready for this, or if you're walking or whatever your game is for this morning, I certainly want you to enjoy and listen to this program. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest. Amanda Testa was born, as I said, in Augusta, Georgia. She is a true Southern Belle turned sex coach, is a soulful, heart-centered expert when it comes to sex and relationships. She knows her business. She helps overwhelmed professional women and couples reconnect to themselves, their libidos, and their partners. Her unique, proven process, the feminine fire method, combines neuroscience and nervous system regulation with the ancient practices to help women heal their relationship to their sexuality so they can eliminate shame and guilt, own their confidence, feel like a goddess in their skin, and have the deep connections in their relationships. Oh, I'm ready. I'd sign up. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you today?
I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for having me, Joyce.
Oh, it's delightful to have you. I was looking over some of your facts, and do you write also?
I do.
You do. Did you write all these books in this picture that you sent me?
No, I did not. I'm not yet a published author, but I do love to write. I write every day.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, in her materials that she supplied with me for this interview, she's falling back on the sofa, and she must have 10 or 11 books and just having a wonderful laugh about it. I don't know what she's laughing at, but maybe that was just her base. But tell me, you've really chosen to pick a subject that for most women, I think is uncomfortable to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And I know sometimes to get to that spot where we really open the needs that we might have to grow and become a whole person, that we've many times gone through that ourselves in our own search for our freedom. So share with me, if you will, your defining moment that kind of said, there's more to life than what I'm living.
Yes. Well, for me, it was after my daughter was born, and I think she was maybe around, I don't know, a year or so old at the time. And I just remember it was one of those mornings, I was totally sleep deprived still. She never slept through the night till she was almost 3. So I was extremely sleep deprived and just so exhausted and feeling like, I was doing all these things that I thought were right for myself. I was taking care of myself. I was, working out. I was involved in my community. I was doing all these things. But I just still was just so exhausted and resentful most of the time. And I just remember one morning I got up and I was kicking over toys on my way to the bathroom and just muttering under my breath, like, I'm the only one that ever does anything around here, just feeling all this irritations. And I went into the bathroom and I just remember looking at myself in the mirror and having zero recollection with the woman looking back at me. I just felt so disconnected from myself. And I know when we, go through big transitions in our lives, it does kind of redefine who we are. And for me, becoming a mother was a big part of that. And of course, I love being a mom and I love my family. And I realized in that moment that I had just totally neglected myself. Mm-hmm. And so I decided I would just start following the breadcrumbs to reconnect to myself. And one of those things happened to be an online course I found with this woman around kind of awakening your sexuality and I was like, well, that can't hurt. Anyone that recently had a child knows that area can suffer. Your sexuality can suffer after having a baby, and just so much. So I was like, all right, well, this can't hurt. And after doing the program, I was just blown away at all that I learned. And I thought, I am a well-educated woman, and I cannot believe that we are never taught these things. This is something every woman should know. And so in that moment, I was like, I just want to shout it from the rooftop so every woman can realize what's possible for us. So that's kind of my turning point.
Well, you made a statement in there. You looked back and you didn't know how you had gotten to this point. And what did you find?
Well, I think, like many women, and especially I was raised in the South in a very conservative environment and very patriarchal in a way that, women were very, the last on the list, let's just say. You take care of everyone else first. And, it's praised to be a martyr in some ways, which at the end of the day, I don't think is a very healthy way to be, constantly people pleasing and not taking care of yourself. And so I found that's kind of where I was. I was just realizing I was doing everything for everyone else, but not for me. And when you have a depleted, empty cup, there's nothing to give other people, right?
Yes. Nothing that they want to hear about.
Right.
Yes. Well, I think the South does contribute a lot to that. Because the mother is the patriarch of the family, although she doesn't really have a voice. And when she does speak, people do listen, but she just doesn't speak very often. And she is really the one that gathers the children and does it all for the kiddos. And so when you give, then there's not much for you to have. So, yeah. So you found this course.
Yes.
And this lady changed your whole outlook. What was can you recall the feeling it was when you realized you were more than just a mother, a wife? You actually had a person, a self.
Yes. Well, I think, we all, at least I know for so many of my clients, it's that craving of being more than just all the titles, right? Really being, a woman and a sovereign being and feeling really good in your skin and feeling alive and energized. And for me, that was one of the big things, is just realizing that our sexual energy is part of our overall life force energy, right? It's not necessarily only about sex. It's just about your aliveness and feeling good in your skin, and like ways that you can tap into that through pleasure on a regular basis. And it doesn't always look like you think it might, right? It's not always sex, but it's just things that make you feel good in your body, and like doing things to nourish yourself. And that just really was a huge awakening point for me, because I think most of my life, all that was for my partner, my husband, right? I was like, well, this is for someone else, not necessarily for me, or I have to look a certain way or act a certain way. And
are you talking about the sex was for your husband and not for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. And I, of course, I enjoyed it and I love connecting with him, but it was not what it is now, right?
Right. Yeah. More of a give and take, shared. Yeah. I'm a big fan of the Outlanders. I'm sorry, I always have to bring that up.
I love it.
But did you watch that series on Netflix?
You know what? I'm familiar with it, but I haven't watched all of it. I've seen a couple episodes.
Yeah, they do something in that movie or series that I thought I applauded them for. They actually showed two people learning each other. And you never saw that. I never read that in one of those books Mother gave me. Never. They didn't have that tenderness that it's okay to look at the other person. It's okay to ask for this. It's okay. So I was so impressed that they were able to put this on film, and a bit surprised at some of the things that was included in the film. But I do give them full credit, or the author of those books, but I have not read those books, that she introduced that, because I think it was a great way to teach some people how to open up to love. Yeah. So you say that you Well, it says you overcome our conditioning about being a good woman and what that entails, and why owning our desires is a key part of that.
Mhm.
So, when you start with women, and I know you have a wonderful program, it sounds, you can go to your website and they can go and read about it. Your
Mhm.
website is Amanda Testa, Testa.com.
Mhm.
And it has, it's a wonderful program. Talk a little bit about how you came up with this program and created it.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think part of it was from all the trainings that I've done, all my own experience, and just kind of combining all of that into something that I really saw work for so many clients. Is there's kind of certain steps that you need to follow to really feel reconnected to your feminine fire, to find that. And you mentioned desires, and I do feel like that's kind of the number one thing, because so often it can be easy to be taking care of everyone else and forget what your own desires are. You know,
Yeah.
I was recently working with a woman, and she had 3 kids, and she's a very successful C-level executive, and just was doing everything for everyone else. And one of the things that she loves doing is art. She loves to paint.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And she had been taking on all these extra responsibilities at her kids' school that were just draining her, and she wasn't enjoying.
Right.
And so one of the things that she realized, she's like, I really want to say no to one of these things, and it's really hard to do, right? It's hard to say no to things.
Yes.
But when she was able to say no, she was amazed at how much time that freed up. And then she started taking an art class again and started painting. And that was something that
Love
helped
that.
reconnect her to her
Yeah.
creativity and her, things that she enjoyed. And when she was able to do that, of course, then more, it's kind of a domino effect from there, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you do something that fills you up, then you have a lot more to give. And then it trickles into all the areas. And so that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of the first thing, is really finding what are the things that light you up? What are the desires that you need to connect to again?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Our creativity is so important to connect with. I mean, a lot of people call creativity your direct line to God, your higher power. And um, but it seems that creativity is the first thing that goes out the window because we consider it, uh, I don't want to say unimportant, but we just don't give it the time, you know?
It's so true. And I do feel like that's kind of one of the things in our culture. It's very based on productivity and doing and not being idle. But the thing is there's so much beauty in slowing down. And I
Yeah.
think we can often rush through everything, right? All the different aspects of our life, including the sexual part, but we just rush and try to get it done onto the next thing versus finding the beautiful gift of pure presence, right? In whatever you're doing. Because even if it's cleaning the toilet, you can still find joy if you're really present in what you're doing, right? Whatever it is, there's a way to find joy in it. And I think presence is a big part of that, slowing down to actually be in the moment.
Mhm. How do you get a high executive like that to slow down?
So some of the tools that I use are there's a million ways, right? But when you're typically moving really fast and it feels hard to slow down, one of the techniques I really love about that is just simply breath, because
Uh,
our breath is so powerful, right? We can
mhm.
It's always at our fingertips. We have that available at any time, and there's certain breathing patterns that can really help your nervous system slow down.
Mhm.
And, a lot of times busy people, they can't really sit still, or it's hard to meditate, or all the things that, you know, sit still. But when you have something to focus on, it makes it easier. So when you have like a breathing pattern to focus on, it can give you something to do. So it's kind of like an active
Right.
meditation, but it
Yeah.
helps your body slow down. So that's
Right.
one of the tools I really love to use.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So, um, breathing is hard. I sometimes have to just walk outside,
Yes.
get barefoot. It's real easy because I'm from the South too,
Yes.
and walk on the ground and to get grounded.
Yes. Yes.
So that's one of mine that I like to do because I live in a house with the grass.
Mm-hmm.
Some people don't live in a house with grass,
Right.
you know.
Right.
So, who do you find? Can you give a typical woman that comes to you to study with you?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, a lot of times it is women who are maybe in a transition time in life, or they have moved through something and now they realize, like, okay, I have got to start having more fun in my own experience. I really want to enjoy sex with my partner. I really want to feel good in my skin. I want to have that confidence again. Or, going through a menopause and wanting to still remain connected, because there's plenty of ways. I think that's another fallacy that our culture tells us, is after a certain age, that part of you dies, which is far, far from the truth.
Right.
And so typically that's it. And they want to learn how to get their sexual desire back, how they find ways to tap into pleasure and really get that feminine fire burning again. And the beautiful thing is, a lot of it is learned practices that you can do, right? That's not, it doesn't always involve having to, take a drug or do something like that. Like there's beautiful things out there if you need them, but there's also a lot you can do just by working with your own body to help reconnect to that and help light you up again. And often, a lot of times, women have never, or people that have come to me have not really spent a lot of time exploring that part of themselves.
Oh, so
right?
true.
Maybe they've never
Right.
even had an orgasm, right? There's so much that there's to learn.
Hmm. Yeah, you're right. There are those women that have never had orgasm. Yeah, nor given themselves an orgasm.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah, when you have a woman that shares that with you, and would she have the comfort to come out and share that with you, or do you have to kind of explore through coaching her?
Well, it depends. Sometimes people do have a specific goal and that's why they're coming to me.
Yeah.
Other times, we just kind of explore what their desires are, because sometimes that's the case too. It's like, I know I need something, but I don't even know. If I had a whole day to myself, I have no clue what I would do.
It's true. They may not even know they need this or would enjoy this because
Yeah.
they've cut it out for so long or never recognized it.
And I
Now,
always like, go ahead.
well, I was going to take a direction. So finish your conversation, finish your statement.
Well, no, one of the things too is I really value a trauma-informed approach. So it's not if someone's not comfortable with something, it's always, one of the things I learned is you can only go as fast as the slowest part of you is ready to go. And so it's always honoring that and going at the pace that feels right. You don't want to over push yourself because that can backfire. So just knowing that, we always honor the pace and the timing that feels right.
Yeah, right. Now, to build your career, you spent a lot of time in different, were you able, how did you gather your information? How did you make this decision to go in this direction?
Yes. Well, one of the things is I have always been in, sales and marketing, and building relationships is something I've always done. And so
Okay.
after I had my daughter, I decided to stay home from my corporate job, which was quite a shock for everyone, and including myself, because I was very successful and everyone was I was like, well, after I had the baby and I just saw that precious little thing and I was visiting all the daycares, I was like, I can't leave her. And so then I was like, this could be an opportunity to pursue some other passions that I had. And I was always passionate about fitness and wellness. And I was an athlete back in the day, not quite so much these days, and so I became a personal trainer and I started teaching these classes for moms called stroller strides, where you bring your baby
Yes,
and you
I
work
had a
out.
friend here who did that.
Yeah. And it was great. And something I realized too, in talking to all the moms, there was a lot of similar challenges, right? Around just, feeling exhausted and not wanting to engage in intimacy and all the things. And so I started, kind of counseling those people just from my own knowledge and books that I'd read and my own personal study. And then I realized I really enjoyed that coaching part. And so I was researching different certifications and programs. But I realized what really lit me up the most was specifically working around the sexuality piece, because I see on the other side of that what happens, how much it's literally like people's lights turn on. And then they have such deeper connections with the people in their lives, and they're more able to ask for what they want and receive it and to fully express themselves. And it's really a beautiful thing to witness. And so I knew that was kind of my, more than just regular generic life coaching. I was like, I really want to focus on this one aspect. And so one of my teachers had started a coaching certification that was a very intense 700-hour program. And so I did that, and I did a few other certifications as well. I also did trauma resolution certification, because I feel like when you work in this area, there's a lot of that comes up to work with.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it came together. But it was really based on what was lighting me up and following those breadcrumbs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So when somebody opens up like that in the most vulnerable area of that they may have experienced, which would be
Yeah.
sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
for a woman in her 40s, 50s, probably 50s, 60s,
Mm-hmm.
that we don't talk about sex. Okay.
Right.
We
Right.
never
Right.
talk about sex, not even with the man we're with
Mm-hmm.
or the partner we're with.
Yes.
So then what is it about taking the steps to open up to sexuality that affects the rest of us?
Right. Well, I think first of all, we are meant to, that's just part of our wiring as humans, our sexual, our sex drive, just that innate need is one of our physical requirements, I feel like, in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the process is learning to appreciate that fact and just know like it's normal and it's healthy and it's important
Mm-hmm.
because it's a part of our overall well-being. Our sexual health is usually an indicator of our overall health sometimes. And
Right.
so the more all of us is flourishing, I believe in a holistic view, right? The more all of us is flourishing, then, each part affects the whole, right? And if it's an area where maybe it's been a long time or it's felt really depleted, or maybe you've been in a sexless marriage for a long time or you just haven't
Right.
even touched your own body in a really long time,
Right.
it can be, kind of a journey to get back to that place of connection. But I
Mm-hmm.
think it's honoring the speed that you need and also learning techniques along the way to love and accept yourself. I think that really self-compassion piece is a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
oftentimes, too, as we age, we go through things. We have injuries. We might have surgeries. We might be missing parts of our body. We might, you know what I mean? And sometimes, too, a lot of women that I work with maybe have had hysterectomies or had breast cancer and had their breasts removed,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. It's like, how do I feel like a whole person, even though my body looks different, right? How do I still enjoy when I feel like
Right.
parts of my womanhood have been taken away? And so, because we still have all the energetic parts, even if we've had the physical organs removed, there's still a lot there. So, I just want to name that too, because that comes up a lot, right?
Oh, it does. Yeah. There's so many women that have had cancer that has changed their bodies. And I don't care. Nobody makes a breast like God.
Right.
Okay. And so you come out of those surgeries. I'm a cancer survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And you come out of those surgeries and you may have your two breasts or you may not, or you have totally
Yeah.
new two breasts, whatever. And it's just, it's kind of awkward. You kind of go, oh
Mm-hmm.
no, can
Yeah.
I share this with somebody or not?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
And I know my
yeah.
my mom went through that too, and I just I remember. I won't share the story because I don't have, it's her own personal story,
Permission.
but I just remember, an experience that, she went through after having her experience with losing her
Mhm.
breasts. And so I do know that the one thing is that, our body is very amazing and our brain is very amazing. And so we are able to kind of rewire our neuro pathways to find pleasure in new ways. So, because it can sometimes feel like, well, this was the only way that I was able to receive pleasure in the past. And
That's
so,
true.
will I
That's,
ever be able to again? And the key is yes, you can, but it does take practice, right? You have to have a regular, I like to call it a sensual wellness practice of just like you would go to the gym and work out, you can, be loving to your own body,
mhm.
right? And that can look like a million different ways, but that's kind of part of it. I think when I think sensual wellness, that's one of the things is, having something where you actually connect with your own body in a
Mhm.
way that brings good feelings.
Right. Yeah. So, in your trainings, do you only work one on one with them, or do you start with a group and then go one on one, or how does your training look?
I do
Sort of.
both. I do both one on one and groups. And one of the things that I do think is amazing about the groups is oftentimes healing happens in community.
Yeah.
And so often someone will share a story, and I mean, every time they're like, I thought I was the only one,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
Or just hearing someone share something and just having so much support around it and just that depth. And I think too, specifically in groups of women, there is a lot of care and support, which we
Mhm.
don't often have as much.
Right.
And
Yeah.
especially since COVID, it's like, sometimes people are easy to gather, sometimes not, but it's kind of rebuilding that muscle of being in community and supporting one another. And I think women just in general are nurturing
Yeah.
and support each other. And also it helps them to realize, oh, well, I am not the only one with this problem. And that makes it feel easier to talk about. And then as soon
Right.
as people start talking, then they start talking.
You're
Right?
really surprised at what comes out.
Yeah.
Well, I know you get this will happen too, that the woman, although she wants more, her partner does not.
Yes.
And so helping the woman maneuver that and think about those things of what they're willing to do, willing not to do. I'm sure you have that part of your coaching.
Yes. Because that is a
'Cause
big part. You know, oftentimes people think, you know, there is that kind of differing desires, or, you know, one person wants more than the other person. And,
Yep.
you know, and so when women are wanting more and their partner is not willing to step up, there's, you know, there's a few things you can do, right? You can, if they are willing to work together, then that's one thing. And if they're not, then I often say there's so much you can do on your own.
Ah, yeah.
You know what I mean? When you
Mhm.
work on your own self, a lot can happen.
Mhm.
And, you know, I think too, sometimes, especially in long term partnerships, there is a bit of codependency that sometimes can happen, right? Being really concerned about this person needs to do this, or if they would only change, then my life would be easier. If they
Right.
would only do this, you know,
Yeah.
it's all them, which is easy to
Yes,
do,
right.
right?
Yeah. Well, it is them.
Yes, it's all them. If they would just put the damn toilet seat down, life would be different, or whatever it is, right?
Oh, those toilet seats, how they do that.
But what I do find is that, you know, the more you can really focus on yourself
Mhm.
and do what you need for yourself, right? And if it's not, if your partner's not giving you what you need, having those discussions and letting them know what you do need.
Mhm.
And oftentimes when there's love there, the partner will step up. Sometimes they just don't know how to.
Right. Yeah.
And so you have to sometimes tell them, which is hard. Like you are like, well, I don't want to have to tell you every single thing. But
Yeah.
sometimes we do have to tell people what we need and like give them a map.
Mhm. So, and I'm going to ask you this because sometimes they don't. They just don't.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not a good match.
Yeah.
And it's like, do I stay or go?
Yeah.
And so I'm sure you have to face that with some of your women, not a lot,
Mm-hmm.
but it does come up.
Right. And I think in those instances, it's like, you know, obviously people are together for millions of reasons, right? And so it's focusing on what you do have. And if you decide to stay, even though you're not getting all your needs met, like really focusing on the ones you are getting met and
Right.
enjoying those. And maybe you're not getting the sexual fulfillment that you want, then you can create your own sexual practice that you do get that with, right? You can create your own sensual self care practice. And, you know, it's not the same, but at least you're still getting that part fulfilled by yourself. While, you know, if they're not willing, but you're willing to stay because of all the other reasons, you know, there's a lot to focus on that's good, I think. And the more you can just let go of that, oftentimes the partner will come around eventually because then you start having this effect of magnetism and they want in.
Yeah. You sort of pull yourself apart trying to protect yourself
Yes.
in a relationship that's not working.
Yes.
And if one of the partners can start just softening a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
it is interesting what could happen in that
Yes.
relationship. No, but there isn't really um, a book that says you do this, this happens, that this happens. And so it's kind of interesting to watch,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So, how long does a client usually stay with you?
It really depends. I mean, sometimes people can learn a few things and just be like in a few months ready to go. Sometimes it
Right.
takes longer. And I think it really depends on the person and what their goals are, how they're coming into the situation. But normally I work with people for around 3 to 6 months
Uh-huh.
is
Yeah.
typically. I
Yeah.
kind of like the longer term because sometimes it does take a while to rewire patterns and it can sometimes take a while to really to see things change.
Yes.
But I do feel like, you know, the more you are consistent and the more that you have accountability, the easier it is.
Do you work with women that don't have partners?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Hmm.
Because they're wanting to have partners.
So, yes, sometimes they want to have partners or sometimes they just want to have, you know, just more connection with themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Particularly if they get that confidence.
Hmm.
You mentioned something here of guilt and shame that we tend to carry around like luggage.
Hmm.
Um, Tell us a little bit about guilt and shame.
Those are two really big things that can stand in the way,
Yes.
especially around sexuality. And because there's so much taboo around it, often coming along, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not everyone, right? Some people have had there's a very huge range of what you've been taught and what kind of, if you were presented sex in a positive way or if it was something that was very shameful or never talked about. And so it can depend. And so partly it can be where, for my example, raised very Southern Baptist, is that, you would go to hell. I remember in eighth grade, a Sunday school teacher told me I would go to hell if I held hands with a boy. And
Oh
so I had a lot of fear around that.
no! Yes.
And then, of course, if something happens and you're like, well, I'm just going to go to hell now. I'm the worst person in the world. And my life is over, right? And so it's learning that that's not true, right? That's not true. That is a fear-based teaching. That is not true. And so it's like really being with the parts of you that are scared and that maybe have shame and guilt and kind of getting to the root. Where did that come from? Is it from you? Is it from an experience? Is it from something you were told? And just knowing how you can be with that, like be with that part and what does it need? And maybe if there is shame, is it really yours or was it given to you by someone else and can you give it back?
Mm-hmm.
And then how are ways that you can move towards what you want little by little? And also, as you do, if the shame comes up, then you can hold it and be with it and let yourself know, like it's usually okay. It's usually like a younger part a lot of the times that's got that embedded in it.
Well, give us an example of when somebody thinks they're shamed or
Mm-hmm.
they carry shame.
Yes. Well, something that I know happens often is, say for example, you're little and you are exploring your body, and maybe your parent comes in and sees you touching yourself, and they're like, "Don't do that." And then you kind of get that message in your body, like, "Oh, I must be bad. Something's wrong. So
Yes.
pleasure must be bad. There must be something wrong." And so then it becomes something that you might hide or feel embarrassed about or not want to talk about, or because you don't understand, like these two sensations feel good. And then you get yelled at for it. And so then it makes a lot of confusion. So sometimes on the body level, then when pleasure comes up, that feeling of I'm in trouble also comes up. And so it's kind of
Oh.
uncoupling those two things and realizing, okay, these don't need to be bound together.
Mm.
Right? I can put this part away and realize, okay, I'm not going to be struck by lightning if I enjoy pleasure,
Yes.
right? Or
Yes.
whatever it might be.
Who was in these self-development, who was it that did so much shame and guilt work?
Oh gosh,
Oh,
there's a lot of, I'm sure, there's a lot of amazing people that have done a good work in
yes.
that area. Yes.
Yes. I was trying to recall. It was a he, or it could have been a she, because they were friends. I mean, professional friends.
Right, right.
So, but um, I would imagine that's not an easy thing to correct. I would think it'd take time to
Mm-hmm.
correct shame
Mm-hmm.
and guilt
It
because they're
does.
usually started in the innocent age
Mm-hmm.
when we're just exploring, and then we explored something we shouldn't have. And so it would take time
Mm-hmm.
just to let it go. So,
It does. And I think it's just, too, at the same time, remembering that self compassion piece and reminding yourself that I'm an adult and I am safe in this moment. And in whatever way, like you can create a sense of stability and goodness in the current moment. A bit back to the presence piece, right? Bringing back presence
mm-hmm.
is having that, creating that environment for yourself where you can create a sense of resource, you can create a sense of what feels good and always go back to that. So then when you're like, oh, I feel the guilt coming in, let me see what that's about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'm trying to take a bath and I want to have a little minute to myself and my kid's crying at the door, but I know they're okay and they have everything they need. They can be okay for 10 more minutes. I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna let them just have their moment and I'll let them know you're safe. I'll be there in 10 minutes. You've got everything you need. You have a snack. You are fine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's okay for me to take 10 minutes for myself. Even if my kid, they're safe. They're not hurting themselves. They're okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's those little things. And then you can come back to, okay, in this moment, is everything is everything really okay in this moment? And usually it is, right? We just have to remind ourselves that. And there
Mm,
might be specific cues that you might need to reconnect to remember that.
yeah. So can you give us any tips to help us feel better in different situations? Um,
Hmm.
our skin feel better and enjoy more pleasure throughout our day?
Yes, one of my favorite things, and I talk about this a lot because I feel like it's an easily accessible way to access what feels good is through our sensuality, our five senses, right? Is really being with the things that bring us pleasure in our five senses. So maybe throughout the day, noticing, maybe what have I touched that felt good? Maybe I really love the fabric of my shirt and I'm just going to enjoy noticing how that feels. Or maybe
Hmm.
it's feeling the sun on my skin, and or getting a hug from someone that you love and just like spending a few moments letting that sink in, the feeling of the touch. Maybe it's that I ate the most delicious lunch and really savoring the flavors and the colors of your food. Maybe it's that you heard a beautiful song, or you were listening to the birds, or the voice of someone that you care about, you were talking to.
Hmm.
Maybe it's that you are smelling something good. I'm a very sensual person. So, as you can tell, probably from my surroundings, I have like
Yes.
soft things to touch, and I love color, and I have all these lovely things to smell on my desk and touch, because for me, those are the little ways that I can drop into my body and what feels good. And
Hmm.
especially when things are hard, and we can all relate to this really challenging world we're living in now, and how daily
Right.
there's more atrocities that we have to hold. It's like, okay, I'm going to come back to the breath again. And one of my favorite simple breath patterns is just, a simple breath pattern of breathing in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. It's like a
Hmm.
triangle.
Hmm.
In for 4. So 1. I'll invite you, if you feel good, you can do it with me right
Okay.
now. We'll just do like 4
Okay.
rounds. So just breathing. You can breathe in and out through your nose here. Breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4.
Now, is that in
Yeah.
with the nose and out with the mouth?
You can do either one. I usually like to do
It
just in
doesn't
and
matter.
out. I think sometimes
Okay.
it's easy to breathe. Well, our bodies are made to breathe in and out of our nose because that's, we have all the hairs and everything to kind of filter the air and bring it to the right
Hmm.
temperature. We can also breathe in and out of our mouth, but oftentimes it can just be easier to breathe in and out of your nose.
Hmm.
But I just invite you to do whatever feels right for you.
Oh, good. She took away a restriction.
Yes. Yeah. Whatever way feels good. And even if you just do 4 rounds, that ideally I like to try to do 10, but even just 4 rounds can just help bring in a little more. It's kind of like water. It's always going to feel good. It's a regulator for your nervous system, because when you have that, if you're feeling a little anxious, it can help bring you down. If you're feeling a little lethargic, it can bring you up a little bit. So it's a very balancing breath that can just be helpful when you're feeling overwhelmed or tired or stressed or whatever it might be. So doing some breath, focusing on, your senses can just be a great way to find pleasure. And I love at the end of the day just recapping, like, what were some of the things that really brought me pleasure today, even if it was just one thing. Just remembering before you go to bed, what was some pleasurable parts of my day? Because the
Hmm.
more we talk about that and celebrate it, the more we are drawn to those things, the more our brain goes to what feels good.
Hmm. Yeah, I have areas in my home. Well, I live alone, so it's really easy
Mm-hmm.
to make that house all about me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but I have always felt that your house should be a reflection of who you are through color, through uh, displays, through arrangements. I did a redo of my bedroom, and it was so
Yes.
interesting. I mean, it's such a reflection of me and what I love doing right now that I am just happy as a pea in a pod. I tell you, I'm a happy girl.
Yes.
And so, but it didn't arrive all in one time because it kind of evolved over COVID when I realized I spent so much time in that room with my TV.
Yes.
And I just went, oh, it's got to change. It's got to change. So I think it's real important. I can tell by seeing you that you do love the being around beautiful things.
I think it makes
Right.
a difference. And even if you share a home with a lot of people, when I first started doing this work, I just had a box of beautiful things that I would put in my bedside table because at that point my baby was a toddler and she would like pull everything and want to play with it all. I'm like, this is my special box and I'm going to hide it. And then when
Mine.
I want to just be with the pretty things, I'm going to sit here with them. So it can start small, like, a bedside table or a little shelf and some little space you make for yourself that's got beauty in it that you can go be with when you want to connect to that. It
Yeah.
is so
What do you
important.
feel about pictures? Now, I know we don't have pictures like the physical things that you can hold, but I went through a box, several boxes, a lot of boxes of old pictures. And it was magical what happened. I reconnected positively with some of those experiences. It's sort of like bringing the joy back in. I mean, not all those pictures were perfect, let me tell you. And I didn't look good in all of them. But it's a wonderful little thing that we can do. We can create that box of lovely pictures that
Yes.
speaks to us, you know, print them off from your iPhone, you know. I think it's really important. Those are little simple things we can do.
I love that so much. And really, truly, both pain and pleasure are both perceived in the same part of the brain. And so when we have a sensation, it triggers an emotion, or when we see an image, it triggers an emotion. And so that can help move our brain. Like, is it pleasure or is it pain? And so the more
Right.
we engage in pleasurable experiences, the easier it is for our nervous system is to default to regulation. And so
Mm-hmm.
having those images, or even just closing your eyes and putting yourself in that experience. Like if you pulled up a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful image that brings back a good memory, maybe just closing your eyes and be with that. Like, well, this one day I was at the beach and the sun was just perfect and the breeze was beautiful and I was watching my daughter dig in the dirt and my husband is sitting next to me and we were holding hands or whatever it is. There was a beautiful sunset. Just even putting yourself, our brain doesn't know the difference if it's real or not, which is why worry can just have the same effect.
Yeah, right.
you know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So
I
I
love that.
noticed that you have a YouTube. What do
Mhm.
you have on your YouTubes?
So I have a podcast. It's called Find Your Feminine Fire. And so when I first started doing my podcast, I did the videos on YouTube. And so I have a
Uh,
lot of videos on YouTube. There's also like kind of some shorter tutorial things on YouTube. So that's kind of what you'll find there, as well as on the podcast.
well, how do they get to your podcast?
So it is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and all the places. You can go to also my website and find it, amandatesta.com/podcast. But that's where
Oh,
my most updated, I put new podcasts out every week. So,
uh-huh. Right.
yes.
Well, good. We want them listening to that as well. Now, you have a gift to our listeners today. Tell them
Yes.
about that gift.
So, what I have, remember how I was talking about sensuality and these ways to drop into pleasure? So, this is just a simple practice you can use to do that. So, you can go to amandatesta.com/sensuality and get that. And it just walks you through a simple practice to be more in your body and to connect more to what feels good.
And then there's something, or you said get in the mood
Yes.
meditation.
And
That's get in the mood for what?
that is get in the mood for feeling sexy in your body, for feeling good in your skin, for being ready for either just feeling more connected to yourself or with your
Mhm,
partner. And so that
mhm,
one is called amandatesta.com/get in the mood. And that uses more of the breath
mhm.
and just kind of some different ways to feel more present and less worried about all the things on the to-do list and more in your own body and kind of shutting down that part of your brain that's more of the all the doing and the thinging and
Mhm.
all, and then kind of bringing more online that part of your brain that's into sensation and in the moment.
Yeah, I think I want to visit those, both of
Yes.
those. Now, your website is Amanda Tesla. That's a car, sorry.
Testa. That's okay. People say that all the time.
Are you relatives?
No, I wish. No.
Testa.
Yes.
Testa.com.
Yes.
And that's where they find all of the jewels. It's a beautiful website. So I really do encourage you to go to that site and look at all the things that Amanda has there. So we have come to the end of our time, Amanda. And I feel like we could go on and talk for another hour. But I always do like to ask a final question, if I could, please.
Yes.
So what has made, can you think of something, I don't want this to be too great that you can't, but can you think of what is the biggest gift you've given to yourself?
That is such a beautiful question. I think for me, the biggest gift I've given to myself is the gift of forgiveness.
Oh, yes. That's a big one. Yeah. Well, we could talk another 30 minutes on that.
Oh, we could.
And yes, for
Yes,
sure.
just because we're human. It's like, I'm going to be a human. I can't help it.
That's a wonderful answer, Amanda. Thank you.
Yes,
So I thank you very much for this time you've given us. It's been a great time to share. And I know that your clients and your listeners always benefit from your words. So thank you so much for being on Second Wind with me.
Thank you so much again, Joyce. It's such a pleasure to meet you and to be here. And thank you all for listening as well.
Now, listeners, you know, I always like to send you away with a wish and perhaps a thing to do. But I do really want you to pay attention to this, that Amanda has provided a key to a part that a woman needs to know, needs to feel comfortable with. And there's so many of us out there that have been chained, and we feel guilty, we don't feel comfortable, and yet it is the key to who we are. So I really, I'm not kidding, cross my heart, I really want you to do this. I want you to share this. Share it, because there's somebody out there, you can change their lives today. So until next week, I hope you have a great week and that many of your blessings come true and you keep on going with whatever and wherever you are. Thank you for being here today and look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.
Joyce Buford returns next week at the same time for another edition of Second Wind. Through the Joyce Buford Empowerment System, women are receiving the support they need through their transitions and are able to reclaim their true purpose with confidence. They receive the tools they need to map out new lives. You can find out more about her coaching services at joycebufordempowers.com.